The day started quietly, with the sun peeking gently over the city skyline. The billionaire was not usually the type to take mornings slowly. His life was filled with schedules, meetings, phone calls, and countless decisions that shaped not just his life, but the lives of so many people who depended on him. Yet today he had chosen something different. Today was for his children. Today there would be no boardrooms, no conference calls, no urgent emails. There would only be time spent together, sharing moments that money could never truly buy. He glanced at the rearview mirror as the car moved smoothly along the streets. His children were in the back seat chattering excitedly. Their voices carried a mixture of curiosity and happiness, the kind that could brighten even the busiest or most exhausted mind. The billionaire smiled quietly, listening to their chatter, enjoying the sound of unfiltered joy that came so easily to them. They spoke of everything: the toys they wanted, the colors of the sky that day, the last book they had read. Their conversation was endless, and he let it be, allowing them to lead the way in their own little world, while he remained a silent observer in the front seat, content and calm. When they reached the cafe, the children's eyes widened immediately. This was no ordinary cafe. It was the largest in America, a place that was renowned not only for the variety of teas it offered, but also for its grandeur, its architecture, and the atmosphere it carried. The ceilings were high, adorned with intricate chandeliers that reflected the sunlight in soft, warm patterns. The floors were polished marble, cool beneath the children's shoes, and shelves stretched high along the walls, stacked with tins and boxes of teas from all corners of the world. Each corner seemed to tell a story of a different land, a different culture, and the children's eyes darted from one display to another, unable to decide where to focus first. The billionaire parked the car and stepped out. One of his children ran ahead, tugging the other gently by the hand, eager to explore. He watched them, amused and a little proud. It was rare for him to be present in moments like these. Work usually consumed him entirely, leaving only brief glimpses of family life, and yet here, in this calm and extraordinary place, he was simply a father. He felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling that reminded him why he had made time for this day. As they entered the cafe, the manager greeted them with a polite nod, recognizing them but maintaining a respectful distance. It was a place that had seen many famous faces, yet it preserved a sense of normalcy for those who walked through its doors. The billionaire led his children down the grand aisle, allowing them to choose a spot where they could sit comfortably, yet still observe everything around them. The tables were arranged with care, each with fine porcelain cups and small elegant plates. The air carried the gentle aroma of brewed tea, a mixture of floral, earthy, and sweet scents that seemed to relax the mind and lift the spirits at the same time. The children were fascinated by the variety before them. They ran their hands along the shelves, picking up tins of tea and examining the labels closely. Each one seemed to carry a story: a mountain valley where the leaves were picked, a small village where the farmers tended the plants carefully, a tradition that had been preserved for generations. The billionaire watched them closely, noticing how their eyes sparkled with wonder. He remembered feeling this way as a child, the simple joy of discovering something new and beautiful, and he realized that these small moments were often the ones that left the deepest impressions in life. When they reached the large tea menu, the children's excitement only grew. Hundreds of options were displayed, each one promising a different flavor, a different experience. One child leaned on the table, reading out the names with fascination, while the other asked endless questions about what each one tasted like. The billionaire crouched down to their level, explaining gently that tea was not just a drink. It was a tradition, a story, a way to experience a piece of the world. He told them about the different regions, about how weather and soil affected taste, about how every sip could bring something new if one paid attention. His words were simple, but they carried a depth that the children did not fully understand yet. They listened eagerly, absorbing each word, asking more questions and laughing as he made small jokes about the way he had tried certain teas when he was their age. Finally, each child chose a tea that spoke to them in some way. One picked a sweet floral blend that smelled like spring mornings. Another chose a rich dark tea that promised bold flavors and warmth. The billionaire selected a rare tea he had only tasted once before, a tea with a subtle aroma and a taste that lingered pleasantly on the tongue. He wanted to share something special, something memorable, and perhaps also to show them that some experiences, even in the simplest forms, were worth savoring carefully. The waiter arrived with gentle precision, explaining the brewing method for each tea, telling short stories about its origin. The children listened intently, fascinated by the ritual. The billionaire joined in, asking questions and sometimes pretending he did not know simple things just to see his children's faces light up with the explanation. There was laughter, curiosity, and a quiet sense of learning that made the moment feel timeless. For a man who was used to decisions being made quickly and always in the public eye, this was a rare experience of patience and observation, and he relished it quietly. As the tea was poured and the first sips were taken, a calm fell over the group. The children closed their eyes briefly, savoring the taste, while the billionaire observed their expressions, noting the subtle joy on their faces. He could see how much they appreciated the flavors, the textures, the small details, and it filled him with a quiet happiness. It was in these simple acts, sharing a cup of tea, listening, observing, that he found a connection far deeper than any deal or investment he had ever made. The conversation flowed naturally. The children spoke of their daily lives, their small victories, and their little frustrations. The billionaire listened, responding with gentle guidance, sometimes with humor, always with a patient ear. He shared short stories from his childhood, carefully choosing lessons that could be understood without feeling like a lecture. They laughed together, occasionally teasing each other, creating memories that were as simple as they were precious. For the billionaire, this was a rare moment of normalcy, a brief pause in a life that often felt like it moved too fast and demanded too much. Time passed quietly, the outside world barely touching their little bubble of warmth and attention. They watched other visitors, observing the way people interacted, noticing small details about the cafe that others might miss. The children began to experiment, adding small amounts of honey or a pinch of spice, discovering new flavors and combinations. The billionaire joined in, suggesting small tweaks, laughing as one child accidentally made a particularly strong brew. It was messy, it was fun, and it was entirely human. In that moment, he felt a deep sense of contentment that he rarely experienced, a feeling that reminded him why he had prioritized this day above all else. Eventually, as the first cups were emptied, the children began asking questions about the cafe itself. How many teas were in total? How did the staff remember all of them? Could they visit the farm where the rare tea was grown? The billionaire smiled, answering each question patiently, explaining that even in a world filled with wealth and opportunity, curiosity and learning were endless. He encouraged them to ask questions, to explore, to be interested in the world, and to always find joy in discovery. By the time they finished their first round of tea, the children were full of excitement, their minds buzzing with new experiences and small discoveries. The billionaire felt a rare peace settle over him. He had spent the morning not making decisions that impacted companies or markets, but making choices that mattered deeply to his children, choices that would stay in their memories long after any material possession faded. As they rose from their seats to explore the cafe further, he watched them, feeling a surge of love and pride that was more profound than any achievement he had ever reached in his career. Even in the simplest moments, holding a small porcelain cup, tasting a unique flavor, listening to stories, and sharing laughter, he realized that life's most important lessons were often learned not in boardrooms or offices, but in quiet moments of connection. Today, in the largest cafe in America, with his children's laughter filling the air and the aroma of tea lingering around them, he found a rare and precious happiness. It was a happiness built not on wealth or recognition, but on presence, attention, and shared experience. And as they prepared to take their next steps, exploring new corners of the cafe and trying new things, he knew that this day, this simple, extraordinary day, would remain in their hearts and his own forever. Once the first cups of tea had been savored, and the initial excitement had settled into a warm calm, the billionaire decided it was time to explore the rest of the cafe. He wanted his children to experience every corner, to see that there was more to this place than just the drinks. He rose from his seat, adjusting his jacket, and offered his hand to the youngest, who eagerly took it. The other child ran ahead, already pulling it the way toward an open area filled with tables and displays. The billionaire followed at a steady pace, keeping a watchful eye on both children, making sure they were safe while allowing them to enjoy the freedom of discovery. The first area they approached was a small section devoted entirely to exotic teas from distant lands. Rows upon rows of tins and jars were stacked neatly on polished wooden shelves. The labels were colorful, some handwritten, others printed with beautiful illustrations of leaves, flowers, and mountains. Each tin told a story of where the tea had come from, the climate it grew in, the family that harvested it, and the traditions behind it. The children ran their fingers along the labels, reading out names that were difficult to pronounce but sounded magical to their ears. They asked endless questions, their voices full of wonder, and the billionaire answered each one patiently, trying to explain as simply as possible without losing the beauty of the stories behind the teas. He pointed to a particular tin that held a rare tea, explaining that it came from a mountain valley where people still harvested leaves by hand, carefully picking only the ones that were perfect. Every leaf, he said, is chosen with care. It is not just tea. It is patience, skill, and love, all in a single cup. The children listened with rapt attention, imagining the farmers working high in the mountains, their hands picking leaves while the sun rose over the peaks. They asked if they could visit such a place one day, and the billionaire smiled, promising that one day they would see more of the world, and perhaps even taste tea directly from the source. From there, they moved to a demonstration area where a staff member was preparing tea in the traditional way. The children pressed their faces close to the glass barrier, watching the careful movements as the leaves were measured, rinsed, and poured. The billionaire knelt down beside them, pointing out small details, explaining how different temperatures and steeping times could change the taste. The children were fascinated, their eyes following every motion, their imaginations painting pictures of faraway lands where these rituals had been performed for centuries. The billionaire noticed how easily they absorbed knowledge when it was presented in a way that engaged their senses. It was not the kind of learning that came from books or lectures, but from seeing, feeling, and experiencing. The demonstration ended, and the children clapped softly, their faces bright with excitement. The billionaire encouraged them to smell the different teas he had purchased earlier, letting them compare the scents, noting the subtle differences between them. One smelled strongly of flowers, another had hints of smoke, another carried the earthiness of soil and sunlight. They laughed as they described what they imagined each tea would taste like before trying it, sometimes wildly off, sometimes close enough to guess correctly. The billionaire laughed with them, delighting in their creativity and openness. These moments, he realized, were far more valuable than any meeting he could attend or deal he could make. They were building memories, creating stories that would remain with the children long after they had grown. Next, they moved to a tasting area where the cafe offered small samples of rare teas. The children were given tiny cups barely holding a few sips each, and the billionaire poured himself a small amount as well. He reminded them to close their eyes first and breathe in the aroma, to notice the colors, and to pay attention to the way the flavor changed as it touched the tongue. They did as he said, their small faces serious as they attempted to mimic his instructions. Then came laughter, as one child made a face at a particularly strong flavor, while the other giggled at the funny noises he made. The billionaire chuckled, pleased to see them so involved, so connected not only to the tea but to the experience itself. While they explored, a small tray of desserts was brought to their table. These were delicate pastries designed to complement the teas, flaky layers, light creams, and sweet, subtle fillings. The children were delighted, trying each one and describing the taste in their own words. The billionaire joined in, savoring the flavors and the joy on their faces. He commented on the textures, the sweetness, and how each dessert had been crafted with care. They all agreed that the combination of tea and dessert made the day feel like a small adventure, and the children's laughter filled the air, echoing softly in the large, elegant space. The billionaire then led them to a quiet corner, where a library of books about tea and culture awaited. The children ran their fingers along the spines, curious about the stories inside. The billionaire picked up a book with photographs of distant tea gardens, showing farmers at work, and opened it to a page filled with vibrant pictures of leaves drying in the sun. He explained a little about the people in the pictures, how they spent their days working in harmony with nature. The children asked questions about the places, the climate, and the lives of the farmers. He answered in simple words, careful not to overwhelm them with details, but enough to spark curiosity and imagination. After the books, They explored the cafe further, discovering small nooks filled with games, small art displays, and quiet seating areas. The children ran ahead, discovering a corner with miniature tea sets where they could pretend to brew tea themselves. The billionaire followed, setting aside his usual formality and joining in their play. He poured imaginary tea, pretended to stir, and made small jokes that had the children giggling uncontrollably. These moments, playful and simple, brought a rare smile to his face. He felt a deep satisfaction that today, he was not only present but fully engaged in the lives of his children, sharing joy, curiosity, and laughter. As the afternoon moved on, they returned to a large windowed area where sunlight poured in, casting soft patterns on the floor. The billionaire suggested they try a few more teas before leaving, selecting a combination of unusual blends he thought they might enjoy. The children eagerly agreed, their excitement renewed. As they sipped the new teas, he encouraged them to describe the flavors, to notice the subtle differences between each one, and to share their opinions freely. They did so enthusiastically, comparing the flavors, laughing at the surprises, and enjoying the challenge of describing something they had never tasted before. While they enjoyed the teas, the billionaire reflected on the day. He thought about how easy it was to get lost in work, to forget these small precious moments. Yet here in the largest cafe in America, surrounded by the scents of tea, the laughter of his children, and the gentle hum of other patrons, he felt a deep sense of contentment. The experience reminded him that life's true wealth was not measured by the numbers in a bank account or the deals completed, but by attention, care, and the time spent with those who mattered most. He realized that these ordinary moments shared fully could be extraordinary. After finishing the teas, the children spotted a section where they could watch the staff prepare specialty drinks, using intricate techniques and precise movements. They pressed their noses against the glass barrier again, fascinated by the skill and concentration of the staff. The billionaire knelt beside them, explaining some of the steps, pointing out the small details that made the drinks unique. He encouraged the children to notice the patience required, the precision and the pride in doing something well. They watched quietly, absorbed in the process, and then erupted into applause as the final drink was served to a waiting customer. The billionaire clapped along with them, enjoying their excitement and admiration. Finally, as the afternoon began to wane, the billionaire suggested they sit down one last time before leaving. He wanted to allow them a few moments to reflect, to talk about what they had enjoyed the most, and to share their favorite parts of the day. They settled into the plush seating, cups of their favorite teas still in hand, and began recounting the experiences, the flavors, the little details that had made the day so special. The billionaire listened, nodding and smiling, pleased to see that they had absorbed not only the experiences but also the lessons embedded within them. Curiosity, patience, observation, and appreciation for the small wonders of life. By the time they rose to leave, the children were full of excitement and ideas, planning the next visit, discussing the teas they wanted to try, and even imagining trips to faraway places where the teas originated. The billionaire followed them with a quiet smile, knowing that today had been a gift not only to them but also to himself. He had stepped out of the constant rush of his life to be fully present, to share, to guide, to laugh, and to enjoy the simple pleasures that often went unnoticed. As they walked toward the exit, the sunlight streaming through the windows illuminated their faces, their smiles, and their laughter. The billionaire felt a rare sense of peace and fulfillment, the kind that could not be bought or achieved through work. It was built instead on attention, presence, and love, and as they stepped out into the bright afternoon, ready to continue, after exploring the different sections of the cafe and tasting a variety of teas, the billionaire suggested they take a little break and sit in a quiet corner. The children eagerly agreed, their small feet moving quickly across the polished floor as they found a soft, cozy spot near a window. Sunlight poured in, casting warm patterns on the table and floor, and for a moment everything felt peaceful and calm. The sounds of the cafe faded slightly into the background, replaced by the gentle hum of conversation and the quiet clinking of cups. It was a perfect space for reflection, sharing, and connection. As they settled in, the billionaire looked at his children with a soft smile. He could see the excitement still lingering in their eyes, the curiosity that had carried them from one display to the next. He decided it was a good time to have a real conversation, one that was different from the usual stories or explanations about tea. He wanted to talk about life, about values, and about lessons that could guide them in the future, but in a way that felt natural and not like a lecture. One child, curious as always, asked about his work, about the many buildings he had invested in, and the companies he had helped grow. The billionaire listened carefully, nodding thoughtfully. He explained that while work was important, it was never the most important thing in life. He told them that the value of success was measured not only in what one achieved for themselves, but in the positive impact they could have on others. He used simple examples from his own childhood, times when he had helped a friend, learned something new, or made a mistake and had to fix it. The children leaned in closer, fascinated by these stories. They could see that even someone who seemed so powerful and busy had faced challenges and had learned along the way. As the conversation continued, the billionaire shared small lessons about patience. He told them that many things in life took time, whether it was growing a business, learning a skill, or building friendships. He compared it to the tea they had been drinking. Some teas needed just a few moments to brew, while others required careful timing, attention, and patience. If you rush, he said, you miss the full flavor. Life is a lot like that. The best things often come when you wait, when you care, and when you give your full attention. The children nodded thoughtfully, imagining how their small daily actions could be like brewing tea, slowly shaping who they would become. Laughter broke the quiet moment as one child asked a silly question about whether he had ever spilled tea on a meeting table. The billionaire laughed, a deep, warm sound that made his children giggle even more. He told them that everyone made mistakes, even adults who seemed perfect on the outside. Mistakes were not something to fear, but opportunities to learn and grow. The children listened intently, understanding in their own small way that making mistakes was natural and even important. They realized that learning from these experiences was part of what made someone strong, wise, and kind. The conversation naturally shifted toward dreams and curiosity. The billionaire asked his children about what they wanted to do when they grew up, what adventures they hoped to have, and what they were most curious about. They spoke freely, their ideas wild and imaginative, ranging from traveling to distant lands to learning unusual skills. He listened carefully, asking questions to encourage them to think more deeply about their ideas, to imagine not just the destination but the journey itself. He emphasized that curiosity was one of the most valuable qualities a person could have, far more important than fame or money. The children nodded, their faces lighting up as they shared their thoughts, and he felt proud of their open minds and eagerness to explore the world around them. While they talked, the waiter brought over a small tray of pastries that complemented their teas. The children eagerly picked the treats they wanted, and the billionaire joined them, savoring the flavors alongside them. They discussed the taste, comparing the sweetness, texture, and aroma, turning the simple act of eating into a playful learning experience. The billionaire encouraged them to notice small details, to describe what they were feeling, and to share their opinions freely. He reminded them that paying attention to the little things in life could bring unexpected joy, and that the smallest observations often led to the most meaningful insights. At one point, the billionaire noticed a small art display in the corner. It featured paintings inspired by tea, nature, and daily life. He suggested they take a closer look, and the children eagerly followed. They walked slowly, studying each piece carefully. He asked questions about what they saw, what they felt, and how the colors made them feel. The children offered imaginative answers, sometimes literal, sometimes abstract, and he listened with genuine interest. He encouraged them to think creatively, to express their thoughts without fear of being right or wrong. This small activity became a lesson in observation, expression, and appreciation of beauty, all under the guise of simple curiosity and exploration. Time seemed to pass quickly as they continued to explore the cafe in small ways, discovering hidden corners, unique decorations, and even a small indoor fountain. The children loved the sound of water trickling over stones, and the billionaire knelt beside them, letting them toss tiny pebbles into the fountain, watching the ripples expand across the water. It was a moment of quiet play, simple yet full of life. He realized that these were the moments his children would remember, not the extravagant gifts or grand experiences, but the attention, presence, and care he shared with them. After a while, they returned to their table, sitting quietly with their remaining tea. The billionaire took a deep breath and looked out the window, noticing how the light had shifted, softening as the day moved on. He took a moment to reflect on the importance of connection, realizing that being fully present with his children was a gift he could give only by slowing down and stepping away from his usual responsibilities. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for this rare opportunity, knowing that these simple moments of togetherness were far more meaningful than any achievement or success he could measure in numbers or titles. The children, still animated, began asking questions about the history of the cafe itself. How long had it been open? Who built it? Why was it so big? The billionaire answered in simple terms, telling stories of the cafe's origins, how it had grown over the years, and how it had become a place where people from all walks of life could come together to enjoy tea, conversation, and community. He emphasized the value of history, of understanding where things came from, and of appreciating the effort and care that went into creating something lasting. The children listened, fascinated by the stories, realizing that even buildings and businesses could have personalities, histories, and lessons to share. Suddenly, a soft commotion at the entrance caught their attention. A small group of people had noticed the billionaire and were whispering among themselves, pointing subtly in their direction. The children turned to him, a little curious, and he smiled gently, choosing not to alarm them. He explained calmly that sometimes people recognize others for what they do. And while it might be interesting, it was important to remain polite, composed, and focused on what truly mattered, the time they were spending together. The children nodded, reassured, and the moment passed without incident. After the minor distraction, the conversation shifted again, this time toward gratitude. The billionaire encouraged his children to think about the day so far, about the experiences they had enjoyed, and about the people who made it all possible: the staff, the farmers, the artists, and even the people who built the cafe. He explained that being aware of the efforts and kindness of others helped one appreciate life more deeply, and reminded them that every person they met had a story worth respecting. The children reflected quietly, nodding and murmuring their agreement, absorbing the lesson in their own thoughtful way. As the afternoon moved toward evening, the billionaire suggested a small game. Each of them would describe their favorite part of the day without saying the words tea or cafe. It became a fun challenge, and laughter filled the space once more, as they tried to find creative ways to express their thoughts. One child described the fountain by the window, another spoke about the art display, and the billionaire described the warmth of their shared laughter. Through the game, they learned not only to express themselves but also to listen carefully, to appreciate different perspectives, and to find joy in simple storytelling. Finally, as the shadows lengthened and the sunlight softened even further, the billionaire suggested they take a slow walk through the remaining sections of the cafe before leaving. The children followed eagerly, noticing things they had missed before: small decorations, intricate patterns on the floor, a corner with books about nature, and even a tiny corner where they could sit and sketch. They paused to draw, to imagine, and to create while the billionaire watched, offering gentle encouragement and asking questions that sparked even more curiosity. It was a peaceful, joyful way to end the afternoon, a moment of calm before returning to the outside world. By the time they returned to their table to gather their things, the children were full of stories, questions, and excitement. They had learned about patience, curiosity, observation, and gratitude, all while playing, exploring, and sharing simple play. The afternoon had been peaceful so far, full of laughter, curiosity, and quiet learning. But as the family explored one of the cafe's larger seating areas, a sudden commotion caught everyone's attention. A group of people near the entrance had started whispering and pointing, their eyes wide as they recognized the billionaire. Some of them quietly began taking photos with their phones, while a few tried to move closer, curious and excited. The children, noticing the change in atmosphere, looked to their father with a mix of curiosity and concern. The billionaire took a slow, steady breath and gently placed a hand on one child's shoulder. "It's all right," he said softly. "Sometimes people notice others for the work they do or the things they own. It doesn't change who we are or what's important. Let's just stay calm and continue enjoying our day." The children nodded, trusting him completely. They had seen him handle pressure before, but this situation was different. It wasn't a meeting or a business negotiation. It was public attention in a quiet, personal space. He led them to a corner slightly away from the crowd, ensuring they had some privacy while still observing the bustle around them. The children continued to sip their teas, the flavors comforting and familiar, grounding them in the moment. The billionaire explained that part of life was learning how to stay composed even when unexpected things happened, and that calmness often helped people think clearly and respond wisely. He spoke gently without any hint of worry, showing them that challenges could be met with grace rather than panic. The children, reassured by his words, began to relax again. Their curiosity returned as they watched the people in the cafe quietly taking photos and whispering. "Why do they take pictures?" one child asked, tilting their head. The billionaire smiled and explained simply that people sometimes wanted to remember moments, or they were excited to see someone they admired. "But our day," he said, "is about us and the moments we share together. That's what really matters." The children repeated his words quietly to themselves as if anchoring them in their minds, and they returned to the playful exploration of their surroundings. As the group of onlookers eventually dispersed, the billionaire decided it was the perfect time to continue their journey through the cafe. He wanted to show his children that life didn't pause for interruptions, and that small disturbances didn't have to ruin the joy of a day well spent. They wandered into a section that featured an interactive display of teas from around the world. There were maps, samples of dried leaves, and small descriptions explaining the traditions and methods of brewing in each country. The children leaned eagerly over each display, pointing at far-off places they had only seen on maps or in books. He encouraged them to imagine the journey of the tea leaves from distant farms to their cups. "Every cup of tea you've tasted," he said, "has traveled hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles. Farmers worked hard, seasons changed, and every step was important. Just like life, every small step counts even if we don't see the result immediately." The children nodded thoughtfully, their faces serious for a moment as they tried to picture the long journey of the tea leaves and the people behind them. They asked more questions and he answered simply, adding small anecdotes about travels he had taken in his younger years to see where the teas originated. They stopped at a corner where staff were preparing teas in traditional ways again. The children watched closely as water was boiled to precise temperatures, leaves were measured carefully, and teas were steeped for the perfect amount of time. The billionaire joined them, showing them how to notice the subtle changes in color and aroma as the tea brewed. "Even small details matter," he said. "If you pay attention, you notice things others miss. And noticing can make life richer, more meaningful." The children leaned in closer, inhaling the aromas and observing the steam rising from the cups. They giggled when the youngest tried to blow on a cup, accidentally spilling a drop, and the billionaire laughed along with them, showing that accidents were part of learning and enjoying life. After the demonstration, they moved to a tasting area where several rare teas were available for sampling. The children eagerly tried a variety of flavors, their expressions changing with each sip: surprise, delight, curiosity, and even a little disgust at a particularly strong or unusual blend. The billionaire encouraged them to describe the flavors in their own words, asking them what they liked or didn't like about each tea. "It's okay to have different opinions," he said. "What's important is to express yourself and be honest about what you feel." The children nodded, comparing notes, debating softly and laughing as they described the teas in creative and imaginative ways. During the tasting, the billionaire noticed a small group of visitors approaching the same area. One person seemed to recognize him and froze for a moment, uncertain whether to speak or not. The billionaire smiled politely, but continued engaging with his children, showing them that attention from others didn't have to interrupt what was important. The children watched his calm demeanor and learned, in real time, a lesson about composure, patience, and handling public attention with grace. Once the tasting ended, the billionaire suggested a small activity to lighten the mood and keep the children engaged. He led them to a table where they could mix and match teas with different flavors, trying combinations that were unusual or unexpected. The children's eyes lit up with excitement as they experimented with mixing floral, herbal, and spicy teas, giggling at the strange results and celebrating the ones they liked the most. The billionaire joined in, pretending to take notes like a serious scientist, and they all laughed together, enjoying the simplicity of play and discovery. The laughter and play soon led to a discussion about creativity and exploration. The billionaire explained that experimenting, trying new things, and sometimes failing were all part of learning. "Not every experiment will be perfect," he said, "but each attempt teaches you something new." The children nodded, thinking about the teas they had created and the flavors they had discovered. They began to connect the lesson to other areas of life, realizing that mistakes and experimentation could lead to growth and understanding, not just failure. As the afternoon continued, they explored a small gallery within the cafe featuring photographs and paintings inspired by tea culture and traditions from around the world. The children were fascinated, asking about the people in the pictures, the landscapes, and the stories behind each scene. The billionaire encouraged them to express what they saw, how the colors and shapes made them feel, and what stories they imagined. The children shared their interpretations freely, and he listened with genuine interest, applauding their creativity and imagination. He reminded them that there was no right or wrong way to see the world, and that everyone's perspective was unique and valuable. Afterward, they discovered a small indoor fountain with smooth stones and a gentle stream of water flowing over them. The children were immediately drawn to it, kneeling to toss tiny pebbles into the water and watching the ripples spread. The billionaire joined them, letting them teach him how to skip the stones or make patterns in the water. The simple activity became a quiet lesson about patience, observation, and enjoying small, fleeting moments. He realized that these small adventures, full of play and discovery, were just as important as any grand experience. As the day moved closer to evening, the children began to grow tired but still remained eager to continue exploring. The billionaire suggested they sit for a few minutes to rest and reflect on the lessons and experiences of the day. They returned to a quiet table near a window, sunlight softening and casting long shadows across the room. The children sipped their last cups of tea, sharing thoughts about what they had learned, what surprised them, and what they wanted to try next time. The billionaire listened carefully, nodding and encouraging them to continue asking questions and exploring the world around them. During this quiet moment, the billionaire spoke about kindness and respect. He explained that the people they had seen working in the cafe, preparing teas, and guiding visitors all contributed to creating a special experience, and that showing appreciation for their efforts was important. The children reflected on this, thinking about the gestures of politeness they could practice, the smiles they could share, and the gratitude they could express in daily life. The billionaire reminded them that even small acts of kindness had the power to make a big difference. Just as they were finishing their reflection, a staff member came by to check on them, offering a small tray of delicate pastries. The children eagerly tried a few, savoring the flavors and textures while the billionaire joined in, enjoying the quiet comfort of the moment. The pastries became a gentle reward for the afternoon's lessons and adventures, a way to celebrate curiosity, patience, and togetherness. Finally, as the evening light deepened and the cafe began to quiet down, the billionaire suggested that it was time to start heading toward the exit. The children were reluctant but agreed, still chatting excitedly about the teas they had tried, the activities they had experienced, and the moments they had shared. The billionaire walked with them slowly, letting them take the lead and enjoying the simple pleasure of watching their joyful expressions. As they stepped out into the fading, as the sun began to lower in the sky, casting a soft golden glow across the large cafe, the billionaire decided it was the perfect time to let his children explore some of the more unique corners of the place. The children's eyes lit up at the suggestion, full of energy despite the long day they had already enjoyed. He smiled quietly to himself, observing the boundless curiosity in their faces, realizing how rare it was to have moments like this where nothing else mattered but being together. They walked toward a section of the cafe that was designed like a small garden, with plants, flowers, and little pathways winding between tables. The area was filled with the gentle sound of running water from a tiny fountain and the soft rustle of leaves. The children ran ahead, their fingers brushing the flowers, noses buried in petals, occasionally stopping to point out the colors or scents that amazed them. The billionaire followed slowly, letting them lead the way, watching the joy and wonder in every small movement. At the center of the garden, a small display showcased teas that were paired with delicate desserts, each one meant to highlight a particular flavor. The children were instantly curious, peering closely at each item, asking endless questions about what went into them and how they were made. The billionaire explained simply, showing them that every detail mattered. Even small things, he said, like a pinch of spice or the shape of a leaf, can change the whole experience. Life is like that too. Small choices can make a big difference. The children listened, nodding, their minds clearly absorbing the lesson hidden in the sweetness and aroma of the display. Nearby, a staff member was demonstrating a unique method of brewing tea, one that involved pouring water from a tall, thin pot in a slow, precise motion to create the perfect taste. The children were fascinated, eyes wide as they watched the liquid swirl into the cups. The billionaire knelt beside them, pointing out the careful movements and explaining why precision and patience mattered. The children asked questions, trying to understand why each step was important, and he answered with simple words, making sure they could grasp the idea without overwhelming them. He wanted them to see that care and attention, no matter how small, could create something beautiful. After watching the demonstration, they moved to a table where small art supplies were laid out. The children's faces lit up again as they realized they could create their own interpretations of the day, the teas they had tasted, the places they had explored, and the feelings they had experienced. The billionaire joined them, picking up a pencil and a piece of paper, pretending to struggle with the first lines while the children laughed. Together they sketched, doodled, and colored, turning their thoughts into small works of art. It was playful, messy, and joyful, a perfect way to express imagination and emotion. While they drew, the billionaire took the opportunity to talk quietly with his children about creativity and expression. He told them that it didn't matter if the drawing was perfect or if it looked like what others expected. What mattered was the effort, the thought, and the feeling behind it. The children listened carefully, nodding as they added more colors and shapes to their papers. The lesson was simple yet powerful. Creativity was about freedom, self-expression, and enjoying the process, not about achieving perfection. Once the art activity ended, they walked toward another part of the cafe where a small stage was set up for performances. Today, a musician was playing a soft melody on a string instrument, the notes drifting gently through the space. The children sat quietly for a moment listening to the music, their eyes wide and faces calm. The billionaire whispered to them that music, like tea and art, had the power to bring peace, focus, and even joy when one paid attention. The children leaned back in their seats, closing their eyes to absorb the sounds, noticing the rise and fall of each note, the subtle rhythm, and the feeling it evoked as the music played. The billionaire spoke about emotions and how they were part of life. He explained that it was okay to feel deeply, whether it was happiness, sadness, excitement, or even frustration. Emotions are like music, he said. They rise, they fall, they flow, and they help us understand ourselves and the world around us. The children listened closely, intrigued by the comparison. They began to talk quietly about what the music made them feel, and he encouraged them to be honest and open. For the billionaire, this was another precious opportunity to teach, guide, and connect without using formal lessons, just through shared experience and presence. After the performance ended, they moved to a small lounge area that overlooked the city through large glass windows. The view was stunning, with the golden light reflecting off buildings and streets, creating a warm, calming scene. The children pressed their hands against the glass, pointing out tiny details, people walking, cars moving slowly, and birds flying across the sky. The billionaire joined them, sharing observations and asking questions to encourage them to notice the small details in life. He reminded them that paying attention, noticing beauty, and appreciating what was around them were as important as any big adventure they might dream of. The children then spotted a small section with rare and unusual teas, ones they had never seen before. Their excitement returned instantly, and they eagerly leaned over the displays, asking about each one. The billionaire explained the origins, the flavors, and the stories behind them, weaving simple lessons about patience, tradition, and care into each explanation. One child asked if they could try a tiny sample, and he agreed, reminding them to savor it slowly and notice every detail. They giggled at the new flavors, some strong, some sweet, some bitter, but all fascinating in their own way. As they continued exploring, the billionaire noticed a small corner with interactive learning screens about tea farming and the people who worked in faraway lands. The children were immediately drawn to it, pressing buttons, watching short videos, and listening to the stories of farmers who had dedicated their lives to perfecting their craft. The billionaire knelt beside them, encouraging thoughtful questions and listening carefully to their responses. He pointed out that every person, no matter where they lived or what work they did, had value and stories worth learning about. The children absorbed this quietly, their eyes wide with curiosity and respect. Soon the children ran ahead again, spotting a small play area with miniature tables and tea sets. They began to pretend they were hosting their own little tea party, serving imaginary guests with enthusiasm and creativity. The billionaire followed, kneeling beside them, joining in their game and pretending to be a very picky guest who needed the perfect cup. Laughter filled the area as they poured, stirred, and served, creating an imaginative world full of joy and freedom. For the billionaire, this was a moment to set aside his usual formality and just be a parent, fully immersed in the delight of his children's play. After the tea set game, they discovered a small reading nook filled with books about nature, cultures, and stories from around the world. The children sat on soft cushions, picking out books that intrigued them. The billionaire read aloud from a few, letting the words paint pictures in their minds. They asked questions, laughed at funny parts, and shared thoughts about what they imagined while listening. Through this simple activity, they were learning about faraway places, different ways of life, and the richness of knowledge, all in a comfortable, engaging way. As the evening deepened, the billionaire suggested they take one final walk through the cafe, revisiting some of their favorite areas and enjoying the last moments of daylight. The children ran ahead briefly, revisiting the garden section, peering again at the fountain and stopping to smell flowers one last time. He followed, taking in the sight of their excitement and energy, realizing how rare and valuable these days were. The simple act of exploring, observing, and sharing laughter had created a strong bond, a shared experience that no wealth could replace. Before leaving, they returned to the main seating area, sitting quietly with a final cup of tea. The billionaire asked them to reflect on the day, to think about their favorite moments, and to share what they had learned. The children spoke eagerly, recounting the teas they liked best, the art they had created, the music they had heard, and the games they had played. The billionaire listened, smiling, and added gentle reminders about the lessons woven into the day: patience, curiosity, creativity, observation, respect, and the joy of shared moments. Finally, as the golden light outside faded into the soft glow of evening, the billionaire helped his children gather their belongings. They walked slowly toward the exit, still talking and laughing about the adventures of the day. He realized that these moments, filled with learning, laughter, and love, were the memories that would last a lifetime. They were the moments that truly mattered, the moments that shaped hearts and minds far more than any material possession or achievement ever could. Stepping outside, the cool evening air greeted them. The city was bathed in the soft light of street lamps and the fading sun. The children held hands, occasionally glancing back at the cafe with smiles, already imagining what they might discover on their next visit. The billionaire followed, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He knew that the experiences, lessons, and laughter shared today would remain in their hearts forever. He also knew